Okay, welcome everybody to tasting number 166 of the Saratoga Whiskey Club. We're having a lot of fun this year, tasting whiskey from all over the world. We have done quite a lot of Scotch this year because we've had some really, really fun opportunities to not only bring in great brands into the shop, but also we're seeing some of these brands come into the United States for the first time as well. So there's a lot of fun developments on that side. So that's kind of why we've had a lot of Scotch tastings. But the real reason probably is, I mean, Holly and I love Scotch, so we do heavily focus on that. Not to say that we don't love our bourbon as well, and Japanese and everything else, but in terms of flavor profiles and differences, it's hard to beat the land of Scotland. But we have a very special guest tonight. We've been talking with Ed Kohl from Keeper's Quest for quite a while now, and we have had Murray McDavid in the shop as well for a long time as well. And actually, this May, Holly and I were both up in the Spirit of Speyside Festival and attended quite a few Murray McDavid events. Hold on here. I'm getting a feedback. Let me turn off this thing over here. Hold on one second. So that was pretty funny. Holly is upstairs, and I'm sure she just joined online. Yeah, she's here in the thing, but her Bluetooth connected to the shop, so I could hear myself in the back room of the shop. So that was kind of strange. But yeah, so
Hi, Ed.
Yep.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So Ed is he's obviously going to explain what he does, but he's quite a knowledge of Scotch whiskey. He was telling me when he was here a few weeks ago about the Keepers of the Quake, which he's a part of. I did actually look into that some more since you were here. It's quite a group. Oh my goodness. I saw they just had their recent event in New York City too. But yeah, so I'm sure you can talk a little bit about that as well, especially when we get to Blair Athol. But yeah, so let's just get right into it. We're going to do 6 whiskeys tonight, kind of a range of things from all over Scotland, some introductory kind of whiskeys, and then some single casks as well. So I'm going to share some slides. I'll let maybe Ed introduce himself. And thank you so much, Ed, for joining us. And thank you for providing us with this great tasting tonight. We're really excited to be here with you. And
I
join you.
appreciate it, Charles. Thank you.
Yeah.
Holly, it's good to finally meet you at last, right? So basically what we are is an independent bottler, and an independent bottler's job is really to get you folks stuff that you really cannot get yourself, okay? Either it be a unique distillery that just doesn't bottle under its own label, or a distillery that is doing some interesting cask finishing. And that really is what Murray McDavid is all about. Charles, why don't you go to the Murray McDavid slide?
Yep.
So Murray McDavid was started back in 1994. And it was really just a couple of guys got together. One guy who was a wine merchant actually in France was actually bringing in single malt Scotch and selling it in France. In exchange, he was selling wines up in Scotland, and the barrels would be going back and forth. And he came up with the idea, well, why don't we do some interesting finishing? Because we've got all these wine barrels. And that was the beginning of Murray McDavid. That's how it all started. A guy by the name of Mark Rene, Simon, and Gordon Wright from Springbank. They all got together and they came up with this concept of actually aging malts, in different style casks. Prior to that, it was all, everybody was just doing bourbon, ex-bourbon barrels, and which is still being done, but it was just kind of common at the time. They really kind of revolutionized it. And Murray McDavid continued on, and they became very successful. Well, then along comes, yeah, the guy from Bowmore, forgot his name already. He came over with the idea of opening up the Bruichladdich distillery. And he went to these guys and said, let's buy this distillery. It belonged to Beam at the time. It was closed, basically shut down. They opened up the distillery, became very successful. The Bruichladdich still is a very successful brand. And he came up with an idea of making some gin. Well, that blew up and became very successful. And along comes Remy and said, we're writing you a check. How much do you want? So they sold the business. Remy winds up with this brand, Murray McDavid. They had no idea what to do with it. They had casks of whiskey sitting in a warehouse, had no clue of what they were going to do with that stuff. They were selling Bruichladdich. That's all they cared about. Well, they got a hold of Edward, who owns ACO Spirits, and said, would you come on over here and take a look? He was a whiskey broker at the time, still is. And he came over, took a look at the inventory, and he said, how much do you want? And they said, well, no, we want you to give us a value. No. How much do you want? I'll write the check right now. That's exactly what happened. So Murray McDavid started up again. Now, this all has taken some time and unfortunately disrupted the flow of the product quite a bit. Charles and Holly probably know about that because they weren't able to get some of these products for a short time. Anyway, we're up and going again, starting back up, offering these malts. And the one thing I always tell people when you're doing a tasting, the first thing you want to do is get a dram in somebody's mouth. So now I'm doing all this talking, let's taste a dram. So the first one we're going to taste is, we're going to go to one that's probably as hard to pronounce as any malt you're going to see. And I've heard probably 15 different versions of the pronunciation of this particular distillery. The one that tell me that is correct is one called, it's Auchroisk. So this particular one, Speyside Distillery, we kind of giving you a little idea where the star is, where this distillery is up in the Speyside, right up there with all the other big boys, Macallan, Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, yada, yada. And this one's kind of tucked away in a little valley. You really can't see it unless you are going to actually go to this distillery. They don't have a visitor site, so you really couldn't go to it anyhow. But this particular one belongs to Diageo. It's one of the components they use for Johnny Walker. That's what this goes into. So all of this malt that you're tasting is going to be destined for blend. You're never going to see this as a single. And here again, that's what Murray McDavid's all about. This is what we do. So this particular distillery, and again, remember me talking about cask finishing, right? Everything that Murray McDavid does is going to be some sort of cask finish. This particular one was finished in a port cask, actually a tawny port cask. Now, for anybody who wants to pick up one of these bottles, I know, can you see me? Yeah, I guess you can.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so here's the front label. The brand itself is called Cask Craft. That's the series that they're selling. This is a brand new series. They've never had this before in the US. This is brand new. The back of the label will give you all of the information. It'll give you the distillery. It'll give you the location. It'll give you the flavor profile. It will give you the cask finishing. It will tell you the actual cask of the winery we got the cask from. All the information is there, which I think is absolutely great, because you're not going to find this on most independent bottlers. They're not going to go to all that trouble. Now, this particular range, as I said, is fairly new. And again, well, you can get that port right in that nose. But this is a very, very creamy malt. Can you, Charles, can you go to the slide that shows the still? Should be the next one.
Yep.
There you go. So these are the stills at Auchroisk. This is actually the distillery. You can see it's fairly good size, big production. I think they produce about 6 million liters per year, so it's pretty good size. And again, they need all this production for Johnnie Walker. Good spice to it. Now,
So we have a question, Ed, with the Cask Craft bottling. How many casks, more or less, are included in a release?
good question, because that enables them to be able to reduce the price point on these single malts. You'll
Yep.
see the prices when we start talking about that. So these are going to be 5, 6, or 7 casks that
Okay.
have been added together.
Okay.
Now, here's the reason they want to do that. When we do, and the last 4 we're going to taste are going to be single cask offerings. When you do a single cask, it takes a lot of extra work. By the time you go through the system and you do your bottling, if you go to your next cask, you're going to have to clean the whole system out, change all the pads, clean everything out. Otherwise, you compromise your next barrel, right? By doing 4, 5, or 6 barrels at a time, you now dramatically reduce your production cost. That enables us now to offer these at lower prices. Still top quality single malt, nothing wrong with it. But by doing it that way, and also we're not going to put it in a tube. We're not going to get real fancy with it. It's going to be a fairly plain label, although the label on the back is pretty descriptive. It's not going to have the real fancy packaging, because we're trying to keep the costs down, keep everything reasonable.
One of the things that we've kind of appreciated about these is, these first 2 products, it's kind of amazing the price point that they're at for an independent bottler single malt. These are $49.99. These are not $100 bottles or $80 bottles. I mean, we have it at a price point of $50, which for us as a shop, and we're trying to introduce people to independent bottlings and what does that mean, and what is cask finishing, and how does this work, all of that. It is like the perfect entry point. Somebody who doesn't want to spend a lot yet because they're maybe afraid or nervous of buying something that they're not going to like. So it's a perfect, we love that. I know, and I'm not going to talk about competitors too much, but Gordon MacPhail has their Discovery series. So we're starting to see some of these independent bottlers come in with these very approachable price points, which are fantastic. We love that. From an education standpoint, it's incredible. So we're happy about that.
The next thing that I wanted to get into is, and I'm sure your club has probably all heard about this. You've heard it a couple of times about adding a little bit of water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're just going to add a couple of drops, right? And why are we doing it? Well, because it opens the esters. When malt is produced from these various size stills, all of these stills are going to throw off a different flux, what we call a reflux. This flux is going to change the components of the esters. And these esters are going to, once they come off the still and go into the barrels, they can get closed tight and shut down, okay? So when you bottle this stuff and you bring it out of these barrels and put it into these vats, you're going to reduce it to whatever bottling proof you're going to. This one happens to be at 89 proof. So by adding that water, it releases those esters to a degree. With the cask strength products, they're not released at all. So the higher the proof you go, the more water you should be adding. And by adding just a little bit of water to this, yeah, immediately it's opened it up.
Yeah, we're not afraid of adding water, that's for sure. Especially, when you have half of it left, or some left, to try it and see what it's like. I mean, I wouldn't put water in immediately, but
No.
taste it first neat, and then add some water and see what it does.
Absolutely, yeah. You want to taste it.
Tasty dram.
What I like, I don't know what kind of glasses everybody has. I'm using these Glencairn glasses. What I like to do is I like to roll it in the glass, and you're going to want to look at sheeting. So if you see something sheet up, like I've got the next one now, which is the Teaninich, and I'm looking at this sheeting. I'm looking, seeing how heavy it's holding on the glass. That's going to give you the indication of the shape and size of your still. The taller your still, the lighter your malt. The shorter your still, the heavier your malt. And it all comes down to exposure to copper. All of these stills are copper stills. And the longer exposure to copper is going to create more stripping that goes on with your malt. Copper attracts heavy sulfurs and oils. So if I get a tall still, and here's a little bit of the question. What's the tallest still in Scotland? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Glenmorangie.
Bingo. Glenmorangie.
The giraffe stills.
Tallest still in Scotland. And so the end result is you're going to get a fairly light malt, which is what they love, because then they do a lot of barrel aging. They'll do the bourbon and the port and all these different things, the Sauterne, all these different things that they do. Anyway, we're through the Auchroisk. Moving on to.
I have a question on the Auchroisk.
Sure.
And I don't know if anybody else is kind of getting this, but I'm definitely on the nose getting like a little bit of this kind of musty funk. People getting that? I'm just curious. And I don't know. And I know
That's from the tawny, right? I mean, tawny can
that was my
be
question.
like, it's not as bright as ruby.
It is from the tawny.
Yeah.
It's like a leather.
But is it also from their spirit? I mean, does their Auchroisk have any sort of a funk to their spirit, or no? Okay. That's
No.
all.
And Holly, you're correct, because we have a linkwood that has also been aged, finished in a tawny port cask. It has the same nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like a musty cellar.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit of dirty sock note, kind of. I don't know.
But like with more of the raisin instead of some of the ruby ports. I like the tasting note, Charles. Is it? Yeah, it's like a sweaty sock.
Yeah, sweaty sock. Not in a bad way. Not in a bad. Well, I mean, I don't know how a sweaty sock can be a good thing, but it's okay. It's good.
I don't think they're going to put that on the bottle, Charles.
Probably
Watch
not.
me put it on the website. I'm just kidding.
So I'm looking here, and what they've described is Oakcast Tawny Port Barrique. Oh, they did not name the producer. Influence: sweet red fruit, hints of chocolate with mellow oak spice. They didn't say anything about a sock.
Well, they missed a great marketing opportunity. I'll tell you that. All right, so we're gonna move on now. I was a little hesitant to do this one second, but because it is lower proof, and from what Ed told me when he was here, there's not a lot of Islay influence on this. It's faint, it's there, but it's not pronounced. I decided let's go ahead and and throw in the second cask craft into the mix. So our next whiskey is going to be this Teaninich, which is, you're going to have to explain this one, how it's finished.
All right, so what they do, again, this will spend probably 4 years of its life in bourbon, ex-bourbon. And then they've moved it into a Caol used cask just to get a touch. And this Islay cask finish, as they're calling it here, is again, it's a Caol cask because they get a lot of Caol. We have a couple of brands that we're not doing tonight, but we're doing one Caol. But this particular finish, when I tasted this, I love this distillery. We had some single cask Teaninich in the benchmark series that was just fantastic. And the Teaninich, if you want to go to the next slide, Charles, just look at the stills. There we go. See how short those stills are? Remember me talking about that creaminess that you're going to get when you've got a really short set of stills? Well, here's a great example. And yes, this is going to be really creamy. It's going to have a very viscous mouthfeel to it. But then just a real light hint of the Islay cask on the back palate.
You know what's amazing about this finish? It's definitely not, your peated kind of expression or anything like that. What I get on the back of my palate and on the finish is almost a hint of like a mezcal, almost like this smoky agave note, because you have that sweetness behind it from the spirit, and the used cask is just barely there, but it's kind of got this definite mezcal kind of note on the back end. It's really interesting for me.
Yep, I get that too. I mean, I can pick up. I get what you're picking up. I like almost a little bit of lemon in the back.
Citrus, yep, for sure.
It's citrus, yeah. But again, I really enjoy. I like Teaninich a lot.
Braden said agricole grassy for sure. I mean, I definitely on the backside. Yeah, herbal, menthol.
I got the grassy definitely there.
This is really a fun one. I really like this.
Briny,
This
little
isn't
briny.
gonna be for everyone, that's for sure.
Ed, we still have the some of the Teaninich benchmark. And we tasted it. That was in the Koval finish, I think, the Koval bourbon, and it was just tons of that like bright herbal ginger cream.
Yeah, I have, this happens to be one of my favorite distilleries. And again, you just don't see a lot of it, unfortunately. This one, let's see. I think this is owned by.
Yeah, who owns Teaninich?
I think it's.
Diageo, right?
Is it Diageo?
Is it Diageo?
I thought it was another Diageo.
Yeah,
I could be wrong, but I always thought it was.
Oh, look right there, the little. Let me check. I think it is Diageo.
Yeah, it is. It's one of Diageo's giant workhorses.
Yeah. And I think this goes in. This doesn't go into Johnny. This goes into several of their other blends.
Okay. Yeah,
But
the color. I mean, very, very light color. Very clear.
Sure, you're not going to get a lot of color because well, the Auchroisk, of course, has got better color because of the port cask. These Caol casks, they're not throwing off a lot of color. They're giving a lot of flavor, but no color. And again, these would have spent, their first few years in ex-bourbon barrels, like most malts do, and then is finished in the Caol cask. Yeah.
I mean, for somebody who might not like peat, this could be a really great kind of gateway you know, it's so light. And that combination of the sweet really helps too.
You really only, I'm trying to think of any other scotch, but the only place that I've seen the Islay cask finishes is in New World, like in English whiskeys, or like the Cotswolds has one.
Yeah.
I know the Lagavulin finish with Starward. So it's fun to see scotch on scotch a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
Well, it makes sense that it's Kalila. They're all Diageo
Mhm.
partners.
Yeah. Right. You know, that's an interesting question, because when I first started with Murray McDavid, we've been with him now almost 2 years. And my question to them was, how is your supply and your stock of Kalila? Because I was in the office of McLeod's, Ian McLeod's office, and talking to the one of the managers, and one of the guys who was in charge of sourcing the malts came in and said, "I got some bad news for you. We just cut 3 tankers of Kalila from Diageo." And that's what's been going on, which is why you're seeing these prices going so high lately. They've got what's happening is Diageo and Pernod Ricard and all the big companies, Highland Distillers, are starting to hold back a lot of their malts because they're anticipating big markets opening up in India. And if that happens and they reduce those tariffs, you're going to see an explosion of malt in India. It's a huge market already.
Yeah.
If they start lowering these, which is what they're talking about, lowering these excise taxes, we're gonna we're gonna have a tough time getting these malts.
Well, it'll be a good world for independent bottlers.
Well, no, not necessarily, because because the big companies that are producing these malts are going to be holding these stocks back, and that's exactly what happened to Ian McLeod.
Yeah. Okay.
Ian McLeod uses a lot of Kalila in their blending programs.
Yeah.
To get Kalila now is a tough thing. They got another thing going over on in Islay, and that's water source.
Yeah.
That's becoming a big issue.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just there in June, and that's what was big talk of the town.
Yeah.
Was water source.
Well, they want to build distilleries there, but the Scottish government won't let them.
Yeah. Yeah, they were talking about, they were trying to get one to be opened up over by Port Charlotte, and the town said no way. You know, there was no way they could support that from a water standpoint. This is really great. I actually like this one better with a couple of drops of water personally. I thought it was it opened up nicely.
Yeah, this is nice malt. Like I said, Teaninich is one of my favorites.
Everybody doing all right? Everybody good with where we're at? Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah, some thumbs. Yeah, there we go. Everybody still has their thumbs. It's a good thing. All right, so we're gonna, let's see here. Now we're gonna get into the real heavy duty stuff. The cask strength single casks. So we're gonna start out, and I don't know if you want to stick to this order or not, but the plan was Blair Athol, then Ben Nevis, then Mull's Finest, and then Kalila to wrap it up. But that work?
That's a good range. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to the benchmark brand of Blair Athol, the PX finish, and jump into that one. And just so you guys know, we did have a 9-year Blair Athol PX at our anniversary party the other night, not by Murray McDavid, by another bottler, but it was beautiful. Very, very, that was a wine finish though. That wasn't actually PX. That was a red wine barrique, but Blair Athol is fantastic. I mean, when you get Blair Athol and an independent bottling, you should be pretty happy. So pretty excited to taste this one.
Yes, and this one, Blair Athol is in that little town of Pauillac, home to Edward. Two distilleries there. If anybody's ever had a chance to get over to Scotland, I know Charles and Holly have been there. What a beautiful little town that is. Bed and breakfasts, great restaurants, shopping. I mean, it's a real touristy town. But these two distilleries are iconic. And this particular one, when I first tasted it, it just blew me away.
Nose.
It's yes, it's aged in the PX cask, and again, Pedro Jimenez, the real heavy, sweet sherried wines. Interesting enough, the guys at Murray McDavid were telling me they have really strong contracts with the Pedro Jimenez wine producers to get them casks, which is a difficult thing to do. These are expensive casks. One of these casks, well, a bourbon barrel will run about 40 to 50 bucks. Okay. One of these sherry casks will run about 8,000. So they're pretty expensive. And when you get sherry finishing like this, you get some real special treat.
This is a beautiful whiskey.
It's not over sherried either. Sometimes Pedro Jimenez being the sweetest of the sherries, I get a little hesitant that it's going to overtake. But Blair Athol, I guess, is, has that nutty kind of weight to it naturally. But Pedro Jimenez can be pretty overpowering. But I think, do you know how long the finish was for?
Yeah, it was 2 years.
2 years. Wow.
So, Charles, can you go? Do we have the picture of the distillery? I think. Yeah, there we go. Again, see how short those stills are? And what are you going to get out of that? You're going to get real creamy. And yeah, you're saying nutty. That's exactly right. If anybody is, I don't know if anybody's been to Pauillac, you drive right by this distillery when you pull into town. Just a beautiful little place. You can see it.
We're going to be there in just over a week. Pretty excited.
You guys, you. Yes. Again, this definitely is going to benefit by a little bit of water, because you're looking at 54.9%. Oh yeah. Yeah, these really open up.
Yeah, this is a really great one. I'm becoming a huge Blair Athol fan. All because of independent bottlers.
Well, again, Blair Athol is completely used for blending.
Yep.
You get a little bit out in the independent bottling range.
Yeah, it's almost like you're sticking your nose right into a pie, like just literally.
Yeah.
The crust and everything. I mean, it's all right there.
So when these casks get picked, and I'm kind of insistent on this, I tell them over there, if I go over, I'll go through a bunch of casks and pick out what I want. Or if we're kind of don't have the time, and that's really a lot of my case, they'll send me samples over. But I insist on choosing all the casks. They don't choose them for me, I choose them. And I've been doing this for quite a while. Actually, last year I celebrated 50 years in the industry.
Wow.
So
amazing.
been doing it a while. And it's, I can tell you that because I go back to my chieftains days. So I used to bring in chieftains from Ian McLeod, and they would send me samples, And I remember there were times I went through all the samples and those casks were bad. And there are bad casks. There definitely are. You can get something that's off, something that just did not develop well, or it got put into a used cask and it just didn't develop. So you can get some bad casks. So I insist on tasting all these things. And I got to tell you, these guys, they have done a spectacular job with this stuff, because I've yet to find a really bad one. I'm looking for it, but I haven't been able to find it.
Can you talk a little bit about Blair Athol and how it's associated with the Keepers of the Quake? I know not everybody knows what that is, but you know, you mentioned that there's 2 times a year when they do the inauguration or ceremony to for new people to the
Right.
association. Can you describe that a little bit, and why is it that Blair Athol is the distillery that does that or is chosen for that?
It's not the distillery, it's Blair Castle.
Okay.
So it's in Blair Castle is about 15 miles north of Blair Athol.
Okay.
And Blair Castle is the estate that was donated for basically tourism. Okay. So it's a preserved castle. And this is where they do the induction and the banquet. So twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, they will induct inductees. In order to be inducted into Keepers of the Quake, you have to submit a thesis to the board. You have to be in the industry at least 10 years, and then they will go through and they will either accept you or reject you.
Okay.
I was inducted in 2011.
Okay.
It's quite an event. You go there, they put you in a separate room. You basically swear allegiance to the Quake. They have a huge Quake inside.
So-
By the way, so what is the Quake, right?
Exactly.
I get that all the time. The Quake is a little cup with 2 handles, okay, which is the insignia. And this Quake was used back in the day. If somebody would come to somebody's house, the Quake would be filled with single malt, and the Quake would be offered to the guest as they arrive, and they would sip that, and then the host then finishes the Quake.
Okay.
And it's a sign of hospitality. Thank you. I'll get that out yet. But in friendship, that's what the Quake is. So years ago, it was the organization was developed and put together, and it really was a lot of Diageo people that really did this. Holly, are you a keeper?
No, I'm not. I've been to the dinners, but I'm not a keeper.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you know somebody.
Charles said that he wouldn't recommend me.
What?
Charles, are you a keeper? Are you a keeper?
No, he's not a keeper, so he can't even recommend me.
Well, you have to be a keeper to be recommended. So keeper has to nominate you. So if you guys want to do it, just let me know.
Just
That's where your name comes from, right? The importing
That's
Keeper's Quest.
exactly keeper.
Mm.
Keeper the
I
keeper
get
quest.
thrown under the bus every day. It's just a new day, a new bus.
There's another organization in Sicily that's similar. Associations.
Called the Mafia. What's that there?
Except that you have a saint burned in your hand. It hurts.
Well, I'm fortunate because they didn't do anything like that. All they do is they make you drink whiskey. Dirty, rotten job, but somebody's got to do it.
That's much better.
Absolutely.
And you're in Chattanooga, is that right, Ed? Where do you
I'm
live?
sorry.
Where do you live?
Yeah, we're now in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Yeah.
So when do you go up to New York City for the events, or where do you go?
Well, I wanted to get up there this time, but I had too many other things going and I couldn't make it.
Okay.
I made their inaugural which was 2 years ago, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
Do them in
this is the
Atlanta?
first one.
I mean, Atlanta would be
I'm-
pretty easy for you. Are they in Atlanta as well?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if they had banquets in different cities or not, but
No, and we've all talked about doing that. You know, it's like who needs another job, right?
right, sure.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I admire
Who
people
was
in
a
New
fan
York.
of the Blair Athol? Anybody? Anybody? All thumbs down. Everybody thumbs down. Blair Athol. Yeah, thumbs down. Yeah. Pretty good one. All right. So before we move on to the next one, we haven't done a lot of Ben Nevis. We have done some Ben Nevis over the years, but we haven't done a lot recently. Ben Nevis is one of my favorite distilleries. It happens to be the second distillery that I visited in Scotland, and I had an amazing experience there, and it kind of tainted my, my bias or whatever you want to call it towards Ben Nevis in a good way, in a very good way. But I know Ben Nevis is not for everyone. Ben Nevis typically has this very, very heavy kind of funky motor oil kind of note to it, which for some people can be a put off. But then I've had some other Ben Nevis that's bright and kind of the complete opposite. So I know they can make a lot of different kind of flavor profiles. So I'm very curious to taste this one. I know this is in a pretty special finish that we don't see too often. So I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. But this is an 11-year Ben Nevis. Pretty excited to try this. Yeah, so they're used quite a bit in independent bottlings, especially in Japan. You'll see a ton of Ben Nevis in independent bottlings in Japan. They do definitely have that Japanese connection with ownership and all of that as well. But pretty exciting to taste this one.
Well, that's the whole issue with Ben Nevis. It's owned by the Japanese. And it's one of the reasons to get Ben Nevis is a pretty difficult thing because it's all sent over to Japan. This particular cask, when it became available and I tasted it, I was really impressed with it. And yes, it's finished in a Pauillac cask. Now there's a lot of top Bordeaux wines from Pauillac. So to get the specific winery, I don't know if they've named that. I don't think they did. No.
Yeah, they say Chateau Lafite.
I'm sorry.
It says on the back of the bottle, Chateau Lafite.
So it is Lafite. Okay. All right. So they did name it. Yeah, Chateau Lafite is probably one of the more expensive Bordeaux wines that you can buy. This, so again, they're going to start with bourbon. And then I believe this one, they told me, was 3 years in the Bordeaux cask.
It looks like it says 5 on your slide. Five in the Bordeaux.
Yep. Okay, sorry.
That's a long time.
It is. And with Ben Nevis typically, when you were there, Charles, did you taste any new make?
I think we did. Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty spicy malt.
Mm-hmm.
And got lots of wonderful spice to it. Again, looking at the stills, they're pretty small, pretty short. Again, you're going to get that creaminess that I keep talking about with a small still.
I love the balance of this one. From start to finish, it just flows really nicely.
Ben Nevis has always had a lot of sulfur, like sweet sulfur for me, but it's not a worm tub distillery. I mean, I know the stills aren't you know, the line arm's a little steep. I don't know, maybe it's the Springbank effect a bit. I mean, I know they're worm tubs, but the kind of cleanliness, that whole vibe of Ben Nevis, but it's always had a weight to it that
Yeah.
I could never really quite explain. And I was actually there a couple weeks ago, and it's definitely like stepping back in time. Not much has changed at Ben Nevis. They haven't done any major updates in a while, that's for sure.
What I love about Ben Nevis is that sulfury quality.
Mhm.
You know that I like funky whiskeys. That's number one for me. I'm a big Ben Nevis fan, and I'm probably in a minority.
Well, when you look at the stills themselves, look at the angle of the line arm. Again, that also is going to have an effect on the flux that they talk about on the stills. So if you get a line arm that's kind of flat, you're leaving a lot of that flux back in the still. If you look at a line arm that's angling down, it's going to pull a lot of that flux. So all of these configurations are creating the various malts. Charles made that mention right at the very beginning of the tasting about how your folks have tasted bourbon, you're tasting gin, you're tasting different things. That's great. But when you get into single malt Scotch, you got such a variety, such a huge variety of flavor profiles all over the place. And it all has to do with, well, their water, the yeast strains that they use to create their beer, the size of the still, angles of the flux, or angles of the line arms, shape of the stills, all this stuff plays in. Every one of them are different. That's what's so fun about this.
You're not getting that. I'm not getting that funk on the end. It's the wine just keeps going, and that's when you really get the wine, is the finish. It just,
Yeah.
It's like you're sucking on a wine candy for a while. It's really, really nice. And that Bordeaux quality has some meat to it as well. So you're, combining that with a meaty spirit. It's really, really nice.
I know, Charles, when we met a few weeks ago, and I had suggested the Ben Nevis, you said, doesn't have that funk, does it?
Well, I was a little worried because sometimes it's really, really funky, and
I've tasted.
most people will not understand that or appreciate it. It's tough. There's times when I've had some Ben Nevis and I'm like, wow, I don't know if this is something that I would sit back and necessarily sip. And I'm pretty open to a lot of things. So there are times when Ben Nevis can be polarizing, and I was a little worried, again about, but then with the finishing, that always makes such a big difference too.
That, sure.
Also, if it's a peated whiskey, the finishing can make such a huge difference as well with the overall experience. So it worked really well with this one, though, that's for sure.
I think also it really comes down to the casks that they use to age it in.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes off the still, it's pretty consistent. But when it goes into these barrels and you line these barrels up, they're all different, every one of them. You can line 15 barrels of a single malt up and taste every one of those barrels, and they're all going to have a different flavor to a degree.
Did anybody add any water to this one? Just
Are
curious.
these your tasting notes, Ed, on the slides?
No, they're actually they come from Murray McDavid.
Oh, okay. I thought they were yours.
Yeah, they're on
the back of the bottle, Holly.
Yeah, it's on the back of the bottle.
Oh, okay. I thought they were his notes. Can you tell me someday what happened to Chieftains?
Yeah.
We don't have to do it here. I remember carrying it at Gordon's.
Yeah. Chieftains was basically the distilleries came to Ian McLeod and said, cease and desist. That's what's going on right now. You're not going to see more independent bottlers. You're going to see less. because of supply. It really came down to, well, Ian McLeod wanted to buy Rosebank, which they did. And now they've reopened it. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yep.
And I was by it when I was over there last fall. It is gorgeous. Anybody gets a chance to go over, by all means. You want to see a beautiful lowland distillery, refurbished and brought back to life again, go to Rosebank. Anyway, they were negotiating with Diageo, and Diageo said, you know, you're selling the Mortlock, and you're selling Linkwood, and you're selling all of our distilleries under the Chieftains label. I don't think I want you to do that anymore. So they basically came to me and they said, Ed, we're gonna have to discontinue Chieftains, or I can sell you a Speyside, or I can sell you a Highland, or I can sell you an Islay, but I can't name the distillery. I said, what good is that going to do? So that was the end of it, unfortunately. So interesting enough, it was about 2 or 3 months later, I got the call from Ben Chambers at Murray McDavid looking for a new importer. He said, you're talking to the right guy.
So to go back a little bit to the story of Murray McDavid, and you know, I always remember Mark Renier being part of that, and he comes from the wine background, and then when he hooked up with Jim McEwen at Bruichladdich, it all just kind of blossomed into this whole new world of whiskey making and finishing and experimenting with different types of casks. Who is it now that really is? I know that all of these people have moved on and they're doing their own, you know, marks with Waterford now, and all of these things are happening. Who is behind the decision making right now at Murray McDavid? And, you know, like, what is the inventory that they carry at this point, you know, in terms of casks? And, you know, obviously when we were at the Spirit of Speyside, we saw how intensely they were trying to be present and involved, and they did a great job. They were everywhere, and we did a lot of things, and it was great. But I'm just kind of trying to understand, it seems like this whole new team, or, you know, group, that's kind of running things right now. And are they trying to reinvent Murray McDavid, or are they trying to keep the traditions that Murray McDavid has had since '94? Or, you know, how is that all unfolding?
Number one, they're keeping the flow and the way it was created.
Okay.
Cask finishing is key. That is key.
Okay.
The person that I'm dealing with, and that really has a lot to do with the decisions on what goes into what barrels, is the guy named Ben Chambers. Ben Chambers is the person that I'm reporting to, and he pretty much is in charge of sales over there. Okay. For worldwide. When it comes to choosing the cask, he's getting recommendations from several folks within the various warehouses. That one up in Koval, that big warehouse that they've got, the Dunnage warehouse. Had a chance to take a look at that. And I mean, they've got some unbelievable casks in there.
Yeah, we did a tasting at the Colburn warehouses, and in May. It was pretty great. But is that where, I mean, do they have more than that? I mean,
yeah, they have more than that. They've got 5 warehouses throughout Scotland.
So we're talking what, 30,000 barrels, something like that, or?
I think more.
More, okay.
Yeah, I think more. I think you're looking at more, probably 50, 60,000.
So when you're talking about independent bottlers struggling, you know, and I don't know, again, with some of these newer ones, like we have in the shop, we have some pretty new ones. Yeah. I don't know what their volume of inventory is, but Murray McDavid is going to be fine. Like, I mean, it doesn't sound like you guys or any of the bigger players, Cadenheads, you name it, are going to have an issue finding. They don't really need more barrels for a while if they don't want them. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand like how that whole process works. I mean, they do it here in the United States too. We have Barrel Craft Spirits bought all of these casks, with this huge idea of growing the business, and then they realize they're sitting on all of this inventory and it's a difficult market and things are changing, and what do you do at that point? I mean, is it the same kind of situation in Scotland where you're sitting on all of these barrels and the market is fluctuating and you're trying to determine how many to release each year? And I don't know. I'm just trying to get a sense of where you were saying there was going to be some struggles.
Well, so first of all, ACO Spirits owns Murray McDavid.
Mhm.
ACO Spirits is also a huge broker.
Yeah.
So they're flowing barrels constantly.
Okay.
Now, for them to be, and there's two ways that they'll source casks. One is they'll source existing aged stock,
Yep.
which is probably, as I understand it, I've been told, about 40% of their stock.
Okay.
They also age new make. So they'll buy new make and bring it in and do it and bottle it up and age it in their warehouses. So there's all kinds of that stuff flowing. And ACO Spirits is constantly trading and bartering. Ben was telling me about a parcel that he was working with Diageo for some Kalila in exchange for some casks that they wanted that they had. Now, I'll give you another example. He called me up and he said, I've got 6 sherry butts of Glenfarclas, 15-year-old. And I said, okay, how many am I going to get? And he said, 1. So we went ahead and bottled that up. Now it's going to be called Spayside's Finest because we can't call it Glenfarclas, but it's a 15-year-old cherry butt of Glenfarclas.
It's pretty special.
Stuff is fantastic.
Yeah.
So Glenfarclas found out, the Grants found out that they had these casks. Where they came from was a parcel that he was storing in one of his warehouses, and the owner didn't pay the fees. So they took the 5 casks for payment. So this stuff goes on all the time. Now, all of a sudden, we've got 5. Well, I'm sorry, I've only got 1.
Too bad.
The other ones went to, I think 2 went to Germany. One went somewhere. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to know.
These Germans, I gotta tell you, they're all over everything. So
Yeah, big time.
all right. All right.
Anyway.
We're not going to bore people too much longer with our barrel talk, which
Right.
Ed and I and Holly and some of us can talk forever about these things, but we're going to move on to Mull. We love Mull. Holly was just on Mull. Mull is an incredible island off the west coast of Scotland, not far from Oban, not far from the Ardnamurchan Peninsula as well. And if we were to guess, this is not Tobermory unpeated malt. This is going to be Ledaig peated malt. Just a guess, based off of the notes that were on the back of the bottle. Actually, I need to move the slide here.
It's probably a good guess, Charles.
Probably a good guess. Yeah. All right. So we are moving into the peated portion of our tasting. At least not the Islay cask finish portion, but the real peated portion. So this is a 9-year.
And again, with Ledaig, it's a difficult malt to source. Not a lot of production here. Can we go to the distillery?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a distillery that's not real big. been around for a long time, obviously. And this one, this is aged in this was in a Koval bourbon. Yeah, this is also Koval bourbon. The Murray McDavid people, the ACO Spirits people, have a really strong contract with Koval in Chicago. And that's kind of important because you now have good source of supply of barrels, which again, me talking about this new make coming in, they'll buy new make, you got to have barrels to do your aging. And so the Koval distillery in Chicago has been supplying them now with bourbon barrels along with rye barrels. It's a nice situation because I know I was involved for a short time with a distillery called Kilchoman, an Islay distillery. Actually, we launched Kilchoman in the U.S. Several years ago with the company I was with before, and that was one of the big issues. Where am I going to get my barrels from? And so Anthony Wills, who owns Kilchoman, came over to the US and spent a lot of time with all these bourbon producers, and they're all going, get out of here. I already have contracts with other guys. I don't have any barrels for you. So it's a tough deal.
So Ed, they, on all of the Murray McDavids, they are boasting Koval. Is that part of the agreement? Because typically you just see ex-bourbon matured and there's no, you don't know who the distillery is. And is that part of the arrangement or?
It is, and if it says bourbon, and there are a couple that will be ex-bourbon, that means it did come from another distillery, and yes, they're not allowed to say. But with Koval, yes, we can put Koval distillery on that, and that's part of the agreement, yes.
What's interesting is that a lot of these are specially bottled just for the USA. So I wonder if the ones that are bottled for other countries or regions would actually use Koval, like would it mean anything to those people? You know?
Well, it probably won't, but they'll put Koval on those bottlings for sure.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we agreed to when I first, was appointed their importer, I told them if we're gonna do a bottling or a cask, I'm gonna want the whole cask, and that's why they did that with, in other words, labeled or bottled for specifically the U.S. because we're taking the whole cask. A lot of companies, importers, will only buy, 20, 30, 40 cases or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They won't take the whole cask. I want the whole cask.
And you are distributing all over the US at this point, or
Yeah, we're in about 35 states.
35 states? Okay.
The big ones: California, Texas,
Yeah.
obviously New York, Massachusetts. I don't get to North Dakota or South Dakota.
I love the nose on this. That's great nose.
Nice. Yeah. This is a great example of Ledaig.
Yeah, I love Ledaig. It's definitely not your Islay malt by any
No.
means.
And
Yeah, it's kind of like control, what's the word? Not controlled, but like a suffocated peat, if that makes sense. Like it's got, like it wants to be peatier, but it's kind of tampered by this cream. Yeah, it's an interesting peat. I'm not used to with Ledaig.
I like how the bourbon finish, adds that kind of extra creaminess to it as well. It's that
a little more sweetness.
Yeah, the caramel, the vanilla note on top of that peat.
Jeff, Koval is a distillery in Chicago that's making different types of bourbon and rye. So it's not a type of wood. It's and it's been around a while. What, 20 years probably now? But yeah, it's a Chicago medium-sized craft. This is
Right.
maybe not the right word. Distillery.
They're actually
Thank you, Holly.
they're
Mhm.
pretty big in Europe. You know, with
Yeah, they've been around a while.
I visited them a long time ago, and I remember the deals and things that they were doing in Germany at the time, and they probably still are, were huge. I mean, it was like, you know how we see Toothletown Spirits here in New York that does the Hudson Baby Bourbon. You know, some of us have always been like, you know, that whiskey, bourbon, whatever, is not all that great. Used to be pretty expensive. Um, the reason why they did so well for so long was because of Europe. They were selling those bottles into Germany, into all of these Central European countries and doing really well. Well, Koval was kind of the same kind of thing. You don't see Koval on the shelves here very often. Occasionally you'll see it at a big liquor store, and they did all sorts of kinds of whiskey. I remember there was a millet whiskey from Koval. There was all of these different kind of grains that they were playing around with. And so it's kind of interesting how that world for some of these US producers is really relying on European sales and connections and, you know, all of that to keep them going. But
Well, that's where Evan Kosleaf started with
what was that?
Evan Kosleaf with Jefferson's.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He he was in the service over in Germany and was complaining that he couldn't get his bourbon over there, so he started bringing it over. Became very popular.
Yeah.
It kind of built his brand over here.
Well, I'll tell you what, they love the American stuff. So you put some cowboy boots and cowboy hats online, and the Germans will eat it up.
It's a
no joke.
it's a huge whiskey market.
Oh yeah, big time, big time.
Actually, here's a little trivia question. What's the largest consuming Scotch country in the world? Charles, you can't.
Okay.
Is it India?
No,
Germany.
no.
Can I now?
Okay, you can now.
No, I won't. I'm going to say France.
You got it. France. So why?
Legal whiskey. India for whiskey rum.
I didn't say illegal, right? Actually, the joke over in India, there's more Johnny Walker sold over in India than there's produced in Scotland. Figure that one out.
Nice.
Like my brother is at Oktoberfest. He got tired of drinking beer, so he went to Berlin and he's checking out whiskey bars.
Cool.
Not a bad idea.
Good idea.
Anyway, enough of that.
All right.
So
So we're going to wrap up on Islay.
yeah, this one is really this was so unique and so different. I've never tasted a Kalila like this at all.
And we have a Romanian, Romanian whiskey club.
No, it's Hungarian.
Oh, Hungarian. Sorry. I blew it. I blew it. You're Romanian, right?
I'll forgive you, Charles.
Yeah, that's right. What is the Romanian stuff called?
Carpathian.
No. The wine.
Oh, it's actually Palinka Otswika.
Yeah.
is-
All right. I got it wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You guys are, not the closest friends, but yeah. All right.
This is Tokai.
Okay.
Finish.
Hungarian is awesome.
And Tokai is actually, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a Hungarian dessert wine. If you can find it in stores, pretty rare. If you can find it in stores, it's really interesting. And what they do is they name it in petunias. So a 3 petunia, 4 petunia, 5 petunia. What that is, it's the basket on the back that they pick the grapes and they put it in the basket. That's a Patonia. So if I'm a 3 Patonia, I'm taking 3 baskets and putting it into the mix to create the wine.
Wow.
5 Patonia, I'm taking 5 baskets. So the higher you go, the sweeter it gets.
Huh.
Now I cannot tell you what Patonia number that they used here, but it is a fairly sweet wine. And that is going to completely change the Caol Ila that you're used to.
Yeah.
I missed the ABV on this one. What was it?
Yeah, this one is 56.2.
We have Tokai here because it's one of my wife's favorite dessert wines, so we keep 2 or 3 bottles on hand. Excellent. One of my favorites.
How many Patonias?
You know, I have to look at the bottles, so I won't be able to tell you tonight because after 6 whiskeys, I got to go dig out Tokai. Not going to work.
Yeah.
No, it's the first I've heard of Petonias. Now I'm going to check it out.
It'll be on the label.
What's
It's
the
like-
maximum number of Petonias?
Number 5.
5. Okay.
Something
From what I've seen, I've never seen any higher.
So that's going to be another question on the advent calendar. Just putting it out there. How many Petonias? Yeah, I just wanted to see Beth Ann's reaction on that. She's.
I'm going to nail that one.
Now, if she gets that right every time, I'm going to really question a lot of things. But
Wow.
this is really wonderful.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot left of this.
So I get more peat from the Ledaig than I do from this Caol Ila, personally, just because I think the dessert wine is
It just softened it right down.
softening it big time. Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. We have a member who was a little bit nervous about doing this tasting. Luke, I don't know if you're there. Still, is he still there? Maybe
He
we
just
lost.
left.
We lost him with the peat. I was just curious if this peat worked for him or not.
Maybe that's why he left.
What about Dennis? Dennis, I see you're still with us. Are you trying this one?
This one has a tricky nose too, because the peat is a little hidden for Caol Ila.
Big time. Big time.
I gave it to
Yeah.
Steve.
Did you even try it? That's what my
I
question.
gave it to Steve.
You
I
didn't try it?
gave it away.
I'm a big Caol Ila fan. When we went to Islay, I got quite a few bottles of that. But this is great. You don't get it on the nose, but the palate definitely delivers.
Yeah. Yeah, when I do live tastings, I always ask people, so how many here like peat? And you'll get, a few hands going up, whatever. And how many don't like peat? Usually it's quite a bit more, right? So I'll usually say, okay, so if everybody would give your peaty glasses over to the guys who just raised their hands, and we don't ever have any volunteers on that one.
Took me 4 or 5 years to move over to the dark side. I used to hate peat, but now I love it more than anything else.
Pete's a good friend of mine.
It takes 4 or 5 years for some people to move over to the space side too.
Yeah.
True. Lowland, right?
The dark
Charles,
space side.
Charles, I just went to get some Glenfarclas to cleanse my palate.
Did you hear him mention about the 15-year Glenfarclas cask that he got?
Steve just said that. I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah. Space side's finest.
Yeah,
Charles,
I'll keep an eye out.
I'll tell you what. I literally have 1 barrel, and I probably have maybe only a couple of cases left. If you want it, it's yours. Okay.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Holly, yes, please.
Yeah, I'd be curious the price of Glenfarclas. But yes, I want it.
Sounds like I wanted to. I like.
You know what you're going to sell it for? Under 100.
For a 15-year-old?
Charles, I'm all over that.
All right. Well, we're down, Ed. Hold those for us.
Is it registered in New York State, Ed?
I will have to do that.
Oh, I don't know, guys. I don't know if we're gonna get it. New York's a pain.
It's a pain, a royal pain.
I have a car. I'll go pick it up.
That'd be easier. Yeah, Saratoga Whiskey Club purchase.
First of all,
U-Haul special.
one of the other caveats to that, you heard about the longshoreman strike?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, guess what? My container's in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, oh. And it was supposed to dock I bring it into Port of Savannah. It was supposed to dock on the 6th of October. So that boat is sitting out there right now, waiting to come in.
You think they're drinking it?
If I was on that boat, I would. But I'll tell you what, and I don't want to get political, but if our president doesn't do something about this, we are in deep doo-doo. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, if you have any chance of getting us a couple of cases of that, we would be very interested. So,
I will, I'll tell you what, I'll at least get you a 6-pack, okay?
all right.
Minimally, all right?
That
I
sounds,
can't promise more, but I'll try.
we'll take whatever you can give us.
No problem.
All right.
You
Appreciate
you guys are friends.
Good job, Whiskey Club. You talked Ed into it. Good work.
it. It only took us 6 whiskeys, but we did it.
I love this Pauillac too,
Yeah.
by the way. It's like the what do I want to call it? It's so soft for a Pauillac. It's still got the soot, but it's got this soft, creamy, drizzled honey on beef jerky, cheese. It's like this meaty sweetness.
The cognac finish one did really well as also.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've got a couple of cases of that left if you want it, because that was I was really impressed with that one. I
Yeah.
liked it because it had lots of lemon. I love the lemon in Kalila,
Yeah.
and it had lots of lemon with that little bit of that cognac finish, just a touch, not a lot. But that was a true Kalila to me.
No, this is really good. Really, really tasty. All of these, I have to say, there wasn't one I didn't enjoy at all. I mean, these were all really great. I love the intro ones. I thought those were just perfect for the intro. And all of these finishes are just a lot of fun. That Bordeaux, I mean, you can't beat it. You know, Ledaig was Ledaig. I mean, you have to say, I mean, even if it's Koval, Bourbon finish, whatever, it still had the Ledaig. If you're a Ledaig fan, that's like a no-brainer. Yeah, and the Blair Athol, I mean, it's just nice, beautiful whiskey. So anybody have any other questions or anything? I don't want to keep Ed too long. I know we all have these.
Hey Charles, when you said the Ledaig is like a standard Ledaig flavor or a palate, what did you mean by that? What's the kind of standard that you would be picking out for that?
Kind of what Holly was alluding to, with it not being this, you know, punch you in the face peat. It's more of this tampered kind of, not necessarily a smoked meat peat, but it does have that kind of muted style.
Okay.
You know, there is going to be a little bit of that coastalness to it, but not a lot. It's not a super briny.
Yeah.
It's not a Highland peat either. It's kind of that in between. You know, with Talisker, we get a little bit more of the brininess, kind of that salty style. Oysters really pair well with Ledaig. It's more of a denser kind of meat.
Okay.
I think it leans more Highland than it does Island.
For sure. Yeah.
With some peat. You know, if anybody's ever tasted Benriach,
Yeah.
kind of similar. And just quickly to explain, it's one distillery. They produce 2 different malts, Tobermory, which is unpeated, and then Ledaig, which is peated. So it comes from the same distillery.
And Tobermory is fantastic as well. I mean, they're both really, really great malts.
Yeah.
And I heard when I was just there, they're upping the Ledaig production because
Good.
it's so popular, the
Good.
heavily peated, and less Tobermory, less unpeated.
I'll tell you what, Holly, over the years that I've been doing these tastings, I'm really seeing people leaning towards peat. And I think that's probably what's going on, which is where it's caused the problems on Islay, because they've got to increase production. They don't have the water source to do it. You can't add any distilleries. So you're limited to what you have available. And as demand increases throughout the world, it's causing the shortage. That's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna leave it with that really down note tonight. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Drink unpeated whiskey? Is that what we're?
Oh,
Boo. That includes Ben Nevis. You're fine, Vinny.
Anyway, would you mind if I end with a little bit of Scottish philosophy of life?
Please, that'd be great.
Okay, goes like this. A horse and a mule live 30 years. They never learn of wine or beers. The goat and sheep at 20 die. They never taste of scotch or rye. The cow drinks water by the ton. At 18 years, she's nearly done. The cat in milk and water soaks. 12 short years, she up and croaks. The modest, sober, bone-dry hen lays eggs for nogs, then dies at 10. All animals are strictly dry. They sinlessly live and swiftly die. And sinful, ginful, rum-soaked men live nigh to tell of 70 years plus 10. And some of us, the mighty few, stay pickled till we're 92.
Cheers. Angela. Yeah, that's a good one there.
Angela.
Being pickled.
Thank you for that.
Good to meet all you folks. Good to meet you.
Thank you, Ed. This was
Ed,
great.
Thank you, Ed.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very excited to carry Murray McDavid, and we're looking forward to working with you for a long time. So whenever you're up in this area again, please let us know, and I'd love to see you again.
We'll do it. Thanks, Charles.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop this one. But, have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
See ya.
ciao.